It is the first model featured in the 2024 Bang Brave Bravern collaboration, featuring the titular character Bravern himself. It is BRV00 Bravern, with a kit of Bond Upper, Emit Blade, Bomb Hammer, Biped Legs, and the leg ability of Adapter, which changes all terrain compatibility grades to A rank if they are not already A rank or better. Now, the first thing you're going to notice, much like it is with most collaborations, is they tend to use these to feature brand new skills to be implemented into the game, and Bravebird is most certainly no exception to this rule, with a very powerful kit unto itself, and for the first ever skill introduced in Medarot S's 4 years, going on 4.5, to feature a skill that buffs relative to the Medarotter's passive equipped to it. Bond Upper is a brand new support skill that upon activation will grant a ×3 skill stat buff to all Medarotter passives that are not armor based when activated. Now, as a friendly reminder and clarification, the passives are the instant numbers you get to those stats just for having that Medarotter equipped. The skills only apply to rare rank and super rare rank specifically, and Bond Upper does not apply to those. But say, for instance, if you have about 300 in heat phase for your right arm on a Medarotter, well, guess what? Once this is activated, that 300 goes to 900 for the duration that this buff remains in effect. And like I said, this is the first ever instance in the game's history of a skill that will become reliant and bring Medarotters into the game much more intimately than they were ever before, and will now require players to pay a little closer attention to what kind of Medarotters will be equipped if they choose to use Bravebird in battle. Emit Blade on the right arm is another brand new skill which, putting it very simply, is essentially Charge Blade 4.0, since Hyper Charge Blade is 3.0. But to explain it briefly, Emit Blade consumes 30% charge upon activation, which is much like it would be an expensive charge for, say, Charge Blade or Hyper Charge Blade or so on. But upon consuming this charge, you also gain a ×2 damage plus bonus every time charge is able to be consumed. And as you see, look at that base power there, almost 2300. No matter what you do, that hit is going to be very moderately painful no matter how you look at it. But Emit Blade does come with a little of a caveat though. Unlike Charge Blade or Hyper Charge Blade, which you can use basically any time whether you have charge or not, Emit Blade cannot be used if you don't have charge present. So this is basically a skill that you cannot use turn 1. Unless you're in a super invasion that gives you that particular modifier. This is something that's going to be required you use with time, whether you spend a turn to charge, or if you get lucky and break something and get some charge in your gauge upon use. Now, once you do get that charge, it is going to be a little of a gamble, but if you can break stuff more than once and with the right metal compatibility and nature, you can overcome that fairly easily. Bomb Hammer on the left arm is the third of the new skills that Bravebird is bringing to the game, and putting it simply, it is now the very first ever instance of a melee-based gunpowder skill being introduced into the game as well. Aside from that, there really is nothing else special about it besides the fact it is a gunpowder attribute skill, so basically you just punch something so hard it blows up and creates collateral damage. That's essentially the simple way of putting it. But it is also worth noting, in light of this particular attribute, if you are fighting someone that has a weakness to gunpowder skills, such as, say, anyone with the leg ability that doubles weakness damage to gunpowder-based skills, this can be a very solid counter against those specifically, as a perfect example. But also, as a reminder, because it is a gunpowder skill, it can be negated by anyone using Gunpowder Guard. Not that anyone really uses it these days, but it's still worth noting just so that you keep it at the forefront of your mind. And because it is an AoE type skill, much like Hammer or Missile or anything of the like, it does mean it's going to spread its damage equally across all active parts of the target. That means if it's a fully healthy target, 25% per part, 2 parts, 50% per part, and so on and so forth. But the only time this rule is made an exemption is if the enemy is using a conceal buff or if they are using a shield to intercept you. of which all the damage will be sponged to the particular part tanking the hit. Biped legs means that he'll have pretty solid coverage across most terrains, and that is actually excluding adapters. So I'm going to skip most of my usual spiel on how bipeds are like the most all-round with terrain coverage, because the leg ability of adapter basically throws all that argument out the window. Adapter means that no matter what terrain you're fighting on, if it's not already A rank or better, which, friendly reminder, is 10% to all leg stats, he's going to forcibly change it to A rank no matter what. Meaning this is going to be a very solid and versatile leg that you can use basically anywhere, and especially on terrains that you particularly may not have a good matchup against. Snowy, aquatic are two really good examples, desert or wasteland are other really good ones. So this is going to be a very solid biped leg, especially with a heavy limit of 2, is something that you can use very versatilely and very reliably no matter how you choose to use it. Now when it comes to the stat department, Brave Bravern is also pretty solid as well, with armor packed at about 3,900 for the head, a little over 3,800 for the right arm, 3,600 for the left, and almost 3,800 for the legs. Very solid, moderately healthy HP pool as well, as expected of a powerful super robot like Brave Bravern. And his leg stats are actually pretty solid as well. With a base mobility of 906, that's already off to a very solid start, and that's not even including any terrain bonuses. With an evade of 1608, he's definitely going to put a pretty solid emphasis on dodging or grazing, which is going to be very good to use at your advantage if you are able to manage it. A melee resist of 1618 means he can most certainly hold his own up close and personal moderately well, and a shoot resist of about mid 1000 at about 1059 is also good too. Not nearly as good as that 1600 in his melee resist, but he can most certainly hold his own against a long range fighter as well. All this being said though, as a pure set score, I honestly have to rate Brave Bravern a pretty well-rounded 7 out of 10 across the board. Most of his skills can synergize with themselves fairly well if you're able to juggle it, but at the same time, I do have to address the elephant in the room. As nice as Bond Upper is as the first instance of a Medarotter reliant skill, and as powerful as Emit Blade can be, his kits is synergetic, but at the same time, it's not. Now, the problem with Emit Blade, like I said, is the fact that if you have no charge, you can't use it. So you do have to make sure that you have something in your gauge to use, and unfortunately, Brave Bravern is a model that is not very charge reliant on his own. He's going to require at least one turn to charge or have a Medarotter equipped that can help boost the likelihood of him getting charge, either from breaking things or from being able to get a boosted rate upon attacking, as an example. Well, Bomb Hammer is probably going to be the most reliable part on him because it doesn't have any major drawback or contingency. You can use it basically as many times as you please, and then use Emit Blade once you have a charge going. But that 30% is also moderately expensive, so do make sure you keep that in mind if you are using it. As mixed parts, I do have to rate him just a little bit higher at an 8 out of 10. Now, if you mix the parts up, you remove a lot of the drawbacks that kind of hurt Brave Bravern while he's on the field. While biped legs with adapter means he's going to be very solid on any terrain no matter what, Emit Blade is going to be the really big reason anyone's really going to pull for him. Primarily if you were to mix that with, say, auto charge leg ability, or even full charge, or fight full charge, head part, then you can really start cooking with some damage, with some high damage output at the base 4K before it ever, almost 4.5K, I'm sorry, before it ever hits any other kind of modifier or damage reduction. However, with Bomb Hammer, that's another one you can capitalize on if anyone has a leg ability or skill of Bomber or Ignis, and you can capitalize on damage bonuses to that. Bond Upper can most certainly have a bonus as well, but that one's going to be the most reliant on the kind of Medarotter you equip to Brave Bravern. So if you're only using it for passives, just make sure you pay closer attention to what passives that he's going to get before you actually use Bond Upper.